Hey, poker players. Mike here, and on today's podcast, we're going to dive a little deeper into the fundamental strategies of PLO8. Also going to break down and analyze some hands from a recent tournament. All that and more on this episode of The Mixed Grill.
Hey everyone, we are live and we're back for episode 2 of the Mixed Grill podcast. How are you guys doing?
Good, Adam. Good. This is Mike. Zach, how are you?
Hey, good, Mike. Hello to you. Hello to Adam. Hello to all the listeners out there, whether it be on the Facebook stream or via podcast. With this episode, we're going to be reviewing a recent tournament that Adam had played, going into some of the more overall strategies around the game itself, how you can formulate a better all-around game. We had talked more about pre-flop last week. We're going to be talking about it again this week. We're certainly not shying away from it, but we're going to be covering quite a bit post-flop as well.
Sweet. So what's up with you guys? You guys been playing any PLO8?
I have not been playing as much over the last couple weeks. Adam, I know, has been playing quite a bit. And Mike, I think you've actually been playing a little bit more too, kind of starting to dip your toes in there, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, us talking about some mixed games got me wanting to play some mixed games. So I've been been diving in a little bit, playing quite a mix, but including the PLO8, trying to get a handle on it. Maybe learn some things with this podcast. Adam been inviting me and hosting some of those games. Adam, maybe you want to talk a little more about that, where you've been playing?
Yeah, we just have a private game that it's on a site that I've played on, a mixed game site. I've played on it for the past year, and they created a private room for us so we can have home games. And we've been having a mixed big bet cash game a few times over the past week, and it looks like we'll probably keep playing pretty regularly on there. And yeah, it's been fun. Been going well. Lots of good action.
Very cool.
Awesome. Yeah, the hope with the game is becoming as big as it has been for our group, that possibly other groups are kind of starting to see a surge in that as well. I know it has not traditionally been the most active or the most popular game in the casinos. It is rather difficult, or was rather difficult to find, here before everything started to kind of close down a bit. But hopefully we'll start to see a surge. It's a great game. It's a fun game. It's a very well balanced game. And I'm hoping that folks will start to gravitate towards it a little more. And maybe we'll start to see it spread in some local casinos, maybe during some big poker events, during the WSOP every year. It's exciting to think about how much the game can grow.
Yeah, and when we're not in series and we're not in quarantine, Chu and I run a fairly regular mixed big bet cash game live as well. So we've been doing that for about the past year or 6 months until obviously we had to be quarantined a couple months ago. But yeah,
so maybe we need to go over some more fundamentals again. We got a question in the chat that says, why do we only get 4 cards when it says 8? It's a really good question.
Great question. Thank you, Aaron, for that. That kickoff question. That is awesome.
Please see episode 1. Yes, the 8 in 8 or better stands, it's a moniker basically for a qualifier. So for the low to qualify, there has to be 5 cards unpaired, 8 or lower, in order to have a qualifying low hand.
Yeah, better is a bit of a misnomer in the title of the game. There's nothing good about some of the low cards that you're going to have here, but they are going to be extremely powerful. Deuces, threes, obviously aces are powerful for a couple of reasons. So yeah, good question to start us off.
But that's a great transition to one of our first topics of the podcast.
Yeah.
Zach, what do we have up first in terms of fundamentals that I think we had some leftovers from episode 1 that we wanted to get into?
Yeah, we had a couple, and I'll cover what we talked about. I know we covered these all at a high level. I think we dove deeper into some of them than others, but if there are ones that we want to touch on more today, we absolutely can. We discussed three betting. We discussed drawing smooth, drawing to the nuts. We discussed equity denial to make sure that we are denying equity from our opponent's hands, and we also talked about bet sizings based on different board textures that we might encounter, mainly on the flop. I know that the starting hand selection is probably a topic we could talk about for years. Three betting and even
it would take a lot of time
Absolutely.
to really talk about it. I think there were some key items may have been kind of left out last week, and
yeah. So Adam is as the more experienced PLO8 player here. Like, what are you looking for in the starting hands, and what are you not looking for?
So, and Zach almost alluded to it or even said it a minute ago, but the ace is super powerful because it has power to win the high and the low side of the pot, which that's the only card in the deck with that much effectiveness for two parts of the pot. So obviously an ace is super critical to have, and we're going to be one of V-pipping as much of our ace XXX combos as possible. So the ace is a key card, and then almost as key as the ace is, I would say the 9 is equally bad. We don't want to be playing hands with 9s in them. I would say you're only V-pipping a 9 unless it's a ace 2 with a suit and a 9, and ideally a backup low card. So really, any non-ace deuce ace 3 with a 9 wouldn't be V-pipping till the button or the small blind, and also the 10s aren't ideal, and really the 8s and the 7s aren't very ideal either. They want to be coordinated with an ace deuce or ace 3 almost without a doubt until about the button or small blind, same deal.
Yes, because those are rarely going to really come into play for the low, like out of your hand anyway.
Right. I mean, you might have some we call it the emergency low card, but if you have the ace deuce 7 and you pair your deuce, and you're just in the fortunate situation where the 7 actually still qualifies you for the low. So where you could pair your deuce and not qualify for the low, it can always be helpful to have what we call the emergency low card, basically a backup low card. So there is some value, but you also, when you have the ace deuce, you play for the low, and then you can have the ace deuce 8-7, and you're really playing for the high part. The 8-7 are trying to coordinate to make a high hand, and
right, trying to like make a straight or a flush.
Right, and so there's some very favorable boards. If you have the 6-5-4, you've got nut. So it's not like they're totally invaluable, but on their own they're terrible. They need to be accompanied by key cards.
And that's a bit of a transition, I think, especially for folks who played PLO high only, to think of those middle, rundown, one gap hands like a 10-9-8-7 or maybe like a Jack 10-8-7, something that would have a lot of value in PLO is not going to be very good in PLO8. Those are hands that you're probably going to want to fold from most, if not every position at the table.
Yes. Double suited Broadways in late position have a decent amount of value, and then the big pairs with double suited coordinated Broadway cards, like as their side cards, are playable from kind of the middle or even about the middle positions,
like a ace king king jack or ace queen queen king or something like that.
Yes, from low jack I would recommend like a queen queen jack 10 double suited plus. So you can't. They have to be the premium high only hands. You want to stick to the premium from those
right,
middle positions.
Because you're never getting the low with that hand.
Yeah, 9-9-8-6 is not going to cut it.
And I think the low comes like 63% of the time. Mm-hmm. Probably a good person to ask is Big Skinny. I bet he knows how often the low comes.
Like how often there's even a possibility of a low hand on a board, right?
And shout out to Dewey. He just commented in the chat. Ace, king, queen, jack double suited is the nuts. This is really that example of someone who's played a lot of PLO, and that thought that it's the nuts in this game going to be a little bit lower. It's going to be above 20% of our range to play that hand.
Yeah, you're going to find folds with a hand like that pre-flop. You're probably going to find spots to fold aces pre-flop. I'm personally on the more tighter range, I think, of most players, but I do think that there are some spots where you can fold ace XX pre-flop and not give it a second thought.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to hear what you guys think about that, because there might be some dissension in those ranks, and I might be giving away too much of my strategy. But like an ace 9-3 without a suited ace, not that's a bad example. Ace 9-6 without a suited ace from under the gun +1. I'm probably folding that.
So yeah, that's pretty tight, because all your ace XX combos are very playable. In fact, they're worth 4 bets in general. You could take this conservative strategy to only playing ace and 2 low cards for 4 bets, but ace is still super strong, because the high always comes. One point to make is the high always comes. And then against opponents, when you're holding ace, that means there's less combos of ace wheel card available, because you're holding 2 of the aces. So
right. So you're blocking the nut low.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. You're blocking a lot of that, and that means that they have more combos of like the jack 4-3 double suited, king 2-3 double suited, which you have dominated, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And then you're also holding some of their low cards that they're going to feel comfortable. So say for the king 2-3 to flop a low draw that they feel comfortable about, they need an ace to come, but you're holding 2 of the aces. So you're blocking their flops too, like where they're going to connect to the board less favorably. So they're really just trying to catch like a set of kings. But I think that running equities is like a big demonstration too of some of this. So
yeah, that's one thing that's helped me, is really seeing it's kind of surprising equities of certain hands running against each other, and really just kind of driving home how important a strong low draw really is.
Yeah, for sure. Say we 3-bet versus an early open with the ace 2 4-3 double suited, and let's give villain kind of a junkier. Let's give him a
very trashy.
Let's give him a trashier. Like, he's got a little bit of a low, but oops,
man, you gave him much better than I would have. Yeah.
Here we go.
That's what I'm thinking. Obviously, if you got a suited ace, that makes a huge difference. If you've got multiple low cards, that makes a big difference.
So those strengthen your hand a lot. Suited, connected, low activity. So in this case, I gave them the dry ace with 1 low card. That's reasonable. I mean, most of your ace XX are going to have a low card involved. And then this dangler, basically, the 9 is a dangler. It's just worthless card.
Right.
So when we say dangler, that's kind of what we mean. Like, the card isn't adding enough benefit. It's not connecting and coordinating with some of your other cards, with your other 3 cards. So if you see the equity, it's a favorite. Slightly.
Interesting, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Mm-hmm. So ace is still very strong. Let's say we turn this to king though. This is gonna blow your mind. I think just changing to king and it gets pretty ugly. 60-40. Yeah. We're not even money anymore.
Yeah.
So to see that difference between having the ace and the king is just, it's, if you play a lot of PLO8, there's a tendency to overvalue how important a king is, but this hand is a favorite, clearly. This is great equity to have versus, I mean, a lot of times you're in 60-40s or 65-35s, so that's right where you want to be with this holding and not where you want to be, and the more often you can be on the other side of it, pulling 60 to 65% equity, the better. I think that's a pretty good example of why ace is still very worth a VPIP. And so from EP, I would say we're still V-pipping ace-ace. And then also, here's another thing. When you're playing against some tougher opponents, they're generally going to be 3-betting. And I think we can flesh out some more of our 3-betting play. And I don't know that we really described it to its fullest in the last episode. But we want to be primarily 3-betting. We want to isolate the pot. We want to deny the rest of the table equity, and we want to take over the betting lead in the hand. There's a lot of great benefits to having an aggressive 3-betting strategy, and there's a lot of disincentive to flat, especially with all the marginal holdings. So yes, we would raise first in 30% from the cutoff, but we are not playing 30. This is probably important to note. We're not playing 30% from the cutoff. We're going to want to be 3-betting around 20% versus middle and 10% versus earlier positions, like somewhere in that spectrum. Well, I'm sorry. Yeah, I would say I think we only want to, and I have some of my ranges actually here. I think we only want to be ever 3-betting. 15% is the widest we would ever 3-bet. I have some.
Let's take a look at those ranges. I think this is an interesting thing for me to see for sure.
Yeah. So
and just if you don't mind going back a little bit, just talking about the you want to be 3-betting, you want to be getting heads up pre-flop. Seems kind of opposite of how I've noticed some players play, and even how like I've tended to play is like in the high-low games. It seems like more people want it's like, oh, get more people in the pot. Lock up either the high or the low, get more money in there to chop up, and then try and blow someone off on the river. Like if you only have half of it or something like that, instead of, you're kind of talking the other way around. It's, get a heads up so you have a higher heads up equity, and then just play it out from there.
Yeah, definitely. Let me close the loop, because there's obviously, we can go down the rabbit holes and stuff. Let me close the loop on the ace-ace. In a tougher game, people are 3-betting more. So when you're opening ace-ace, you're generally getting folds or 3-bets, and you're totally fine. Again, we saw like a really good hand. We're faring fine if we get 3-bet by other hands from that example. So that's a key part to why we can still be raising all our ace-ace XX, because we fully expect to induce a lot of folds except from the big blind, or get 3-bet in tougher games where people are playing more of the strategy. So with Zach saying he's dumping some of these weaker ace-aces, I think that's totally understandable in games that play loose and there's a lot. And if you're limping, that's when it becomes less advisable to limp early with the weaker ace-ace, because we are not isolating and we're not getting heads up. Now it has a lot less playability on the flop. So games that play that way, I would say if you're gonna buy into that different strategy, then that's probably something to consider, folding out some of those weaker ace-ace. So yes, in general, like recreational players at the lower stakes are playing more of what you're describing. A strategy that has a lot of limping, a lot of family pots. But theoretically, we want to be trying to isolate hands as much as possible. So from my personal opinion, and the strategy that I'm going to deploy is going to be isolation raises and potting it when there's been a lot of limpers with my strongest holdings, and attempting to get the to more heads up or shorter handed pots, because the equities do run so close. And we pointed that out in episode 1. And your also chances of denying one person's equity are vastly superior to denying the equity of multiple people. So we win a whole pot when we bet and we induce a fold from every opponent. When there's one opponent, that's just one person we have to induce a fold from. But if there's several opponents, it's going to be really hard, and almost our strategy is going to change versus family pots, multi-way pots, because we won't be doing as much c-betting. We won't be trying to do as much equity denial, because it's going to be really hard to accomplish that.
Right. Like in a splashier game, you're just not getting the folds that you will in a tougher, I guess, like higher level game.
Yeah, for sure. Well, even in tougher games, you're still going to see players that advocate the flatting a decent amount of hands. You might even see common situations with the small blind and big blind flat that can you're still going to see those multi-way pots. So we're still going to have to adjust and have a different strategy in the multi-way pots versus the heads-up pots. But definitely in the heads-up pots, we're going to be c-betting upwards of 80 to 100, depending on our position and flop textures and things like that. But the EP versus the big blind, I would recommend 100% c-bet percentage.
Gotcha. And I'm seeing some good questions in the chat. They're talking more post flop. Maybe we'll get to those in a minute. But you're talking about multi-way versus heads up. Are there any? So we're talking about these pre-flop hand, properties. Are there any particular hands that like work better multi-way or ones that that work that don't work as well heads up, or the other way around, like that work well heads up but they don't work well multi-way? Probably more the second. Probably more like, are there any good like heads up hands that aren't particularly great multi-way?
Oh, yes. We feel like we're not going to want to squeeze or 3-bet, and we feel like in the spot there's going to be calls. So say we might have a strategy where we're going to squeeze with like all our double suited ace, deuce, ace 3 type hands and a Broadway card. Those are for sure. Those are like slam dunk squeezes and 3-bets. But if you're in situations like, okay, a great one is the big blind, where say we would probably squeeze with those holdings, but we might want to just cold call with like ace 2 and a nut suit. And those have a lot of post-flop playability because they're going to flop nut flush draws and nut low draws. So we can continue on a lot of boards or even apply pressure when we notice that we have a favorable spot. Our opponents are disinterested and we might be able to bet, deny their equity, induce folds, so forth. So those hands, just because they are going to flop more boards that we can continue on, are going to be some of those ones that are reasonable cold calls, or you feel fine going to multi-way. Or low. Another hand I could think of is like a low only hand. But it's still really hard to hold on when you don't have the low yet. But if you have the ace 2, 3, 4 Badugi, that's another good example where you could flat the big blind instead of squeezing, and then you're pulling so much low only equity, and you're going to have a great situation anytime your two opponents are fighting over the high side of the pot and you've got the low locked up.
Yeah. So that I think that goes perfectly into this question I see here from Andre, talking about if you have the nut low. So he says, true or false, if you have made the nut low, it's generally not advisable to raise or bet all the way through the river, especially if there's more than one opponent. So I guess he's kind of alluding to that kind of situation. If there's multiple people, if you're against multiple opponents, do you want to be raising, or do you want to be flatting, or do you want to be continue betting if you've bet previously?
So if we're heads up, we definitely want to be betting when we've made the nut low. And I would say the board texture is what would dictate our sizing and our stack sizes, because we want to plan out our bet sizings. So maybe you have a situation where you're going to be all in on the turn. You might know this ahead of time, so you want to size accordingly to your flop bet, and then you're planning to jam on the turn. Similar concepts you see in Hold'em, but multi-way, yes, it's going to change, but we're still generally betting in position with the nut low, because we're forgetting that we have fold equity. If we're concerned about two opponents being in the pot, or what if I'm getting quartered, or what if we all have the nut low, I don't really have much the high. Well, what if they both have the high and you're the only one with the low? That's kind of like, there's no way to really figure that out except for some feel or like a lot of experience of the game, and like kind of comes with time, where you can kind of get some feel for it. But I would say mathematically, we're just trying to, there isn't really any support for like slowing down with the nut low, because you really could be building a bigger pot that you might be getting half, and they might be fighting over the other quarter, the other
Right.
half.
So I'm hearing you definitely want to get bets in, but say you flatted the flop and you make your nut low on the turn, and there's two opponents and one of them bets and the other one calls.
Yeah.
Are you more flatting behind, or are
Yes.
you raising?
Yeah, doing a lot of overcalling. Out of position is a totally different scenario. In position, we want to be betting, and we want to be a lot of turns. If we already have the nut low, we want to size up and get like a 70% pot bet in there, 80% pot in there, and put the pressure on and make some of their. Another thing is when you have say you have naked ace deuce, say they have naked ace deuce, you have no idea when you're making opponents fold ace deuce and they actually had you quartered. Like sometimes you both have weak ace deuce. In position, you want to still be betting. Out of position is a totally different story. I think it's almost ideal to overcall and keep both opponents in the hand and just try to increase that chance that you're getting half of a bigger pot, because if you push them out and you isolate down to the one player, you say you make a squeeze raise on the turn with the nut low, and then you induce a fold from a guy who had more high equity, and you get a call from a guy with the nut high. Now you've gotten an isolated and playing for the remainder. This is a guaranteed split pot where you would have gotten half from, if there's another bet on the river, that you could get half from two additional bets from your opponents. That's more ideal.
Right. So that kind of does the common sense kind of makes sense there.
Yes, and this is like that is a concept that's really big in the limit split pot games. Like, and one thing you might even do is actually lead with the nut low, and you might even lead like a 40 or 50% sizing with the nut low, because you're trying to get more bets out of your opponents instead of doing the check bet, and then you overcall. You almost want to maybe even try to ensure. It's kind of like a feeler bet, also like building your equity, like your half of the pot, and a chance that you might just take it down. But depending on what your opponents do, you're going to get a lot more information by leading. Whereas like no limit hold'em, I'm not a big advocate for doing leading. But in this game, leading is a viable option in multi-way pots, no doubt about it. Especially after soft flop play. Say we get through checks and you have the nut low and you're out of position against two opponents. It's time to start letting it rip. 60% sizings on the turn. And if we can win the whole pot, that's the best case scenario. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Nice.
It's one person calling turn river and we chop the pot is not the ideal situation. The ideal situation is we bet, they both fold, and we win with our nut low. You see what I'm saying? We win the whole pot.
One more question, maybe then let's get into the next thing on the agenda. Jeff asked, so Jeff says, seems like it's definitely better to flop a set. So he's talking about flopping a set when the board comes 2 or 3 high cards. So I guess saying if he's got like a middle or low pocket pair, we might have to talk about pre-flop hand selection there.
Maybe like an ace deuce 5-5 with a 5 king jack sort of flop.
Yeah, I guess. So he's saying, he says, seems to him that when you flop a set with 3 low cards, how aggressive should you play considering you're likely only playing for half the pot? I don't know about that question. I mean, maybe I can throw an opinion here. Like if you're flopping a low set and you don't also have a low hand, then you probably shouldn't be playing that hand.
You should. So you're playing too wide for sure. And I'm glad he asked this question, because that was in one of my starting hand qualities deficiencies that I actually forgot to mention. But I did make a note after the last podcast that low pocket pairs are bad. And I see them being played prevalently. And in fact, I think this review that we're going to do of the tournament I played, I think towards the end we see a mistake that occurs, and Villain is playing a low pocket pair with this exact situation he's describing, and he is pretty much crippled after that hand and shortly after out of the tournament. I think it's this tournament that we're going to review. But low pocket pairs are a bad characteristic in our starting hands. We do not want to be playing pairs below 10s, and we can start adding like in the hijack, we'll start adding 7 ace deuce plus 7 ace 3 plus. But those little pairs, we really don't want them to be in our range ever except for like the button. And when they are in our range, they're accompanied by ace deuce, ace 4, you know?
Right. Another thing go ahead, Zach.
Oh, I think we're going to say the same thing. The possibility of either just limping in the small blind or checking in the big blind with the hand that we'd normally throw away. That was something that Jeff had just mentioned as well. Situations where we may not want to be V-pipping necessarily with those hands, but, we still may end up with a weird situation where we have them and end up, flopping the set with them.
Yeah, so he gives an example of we're in the big blind, we're forced to play it. So this is kind of like the same advice I would give from what I just mentioned earlier. It comes with feel over time. Of course, these sets can win pots, but they also are high risk and really low reward.
And also, and like in the early first part of his question,
I think we lost Mike. I think his power went out.
Oh no! Yeah, there's some bad storms going around. So,
well, his lights turned out and then he was gone.
Yeah.
So I think his power went out.
Oh man.
Well, we lost Mike. But yeah, I think that it's high risk, low reward for those baby sets, because when you do get action, it's never ideal. It's likely someone drawing to the nuts or already has the nuts or a better set than you.
Right.
And then the pot, during the big blind unraised and the pot is small, so we're not trying to win a lot of chips here with this hand. And so my advice would be proceed with caution with those little sets.
Very good advice.
So I think that let's try to touch over to 3-betting strategy real quick, because I feel like we didn't say anything about it.
Did you want to move into the tournament review as well?
Yeah, we'll move into the tournament review here pretty soon. Just to recap some 3-betting strategies, you can see my range up on the screen that I've kind of recommended, and these are all super strong holdings. The top 5% is going to be your ace 3, 5, 10 single suited plus, your ace 3, 10, 10 single suited plus, ace deuce 10, 10 single suited plus, and then really any double suited ace 3, 2 broadways plus. And then you're going to have your single suited versions of those hands that might not be a suited ace. The suited ace is a lot more ideal than like the suited jack 4 or jack 3 or whatever. So that's kind of how you get to the 10%. It's just the non-suited or non-suited ace, the non-double suited. That adds a lot. Like, our combinations that are double suited are far less, and I don't know the exact permutation of how many that would be. There's just 40,000 permutations of PLO starting hands. And so how many of we can do the math if we really wanted to, but I don't know it off the top of my head. But our double suited hands are going to be a small percentage of that part of our range. So the ace 3, jack 10 double suited, there's a few combos of those. I think we could work it out if we wanted to, but there's vastly more combos of the non-double suited. So that's how you get to the 10%. Just the non-double suited gets you there.
Once again, appreciate everyone joining on the Facebook. Had lots of good questions so far. And yeah, we're going to keep plowing through this. So hopefully you guys are going to dodge the bad weather, those that are in this area. But stick around with us if you're able to.
I had a visitor.
Welcome back, Adam.
I had a couple visitors.
It's more people wanted to figure out about PLO8.
Yeah. So, maybe some people will stop in because of all the storms.
There you go.
All right, so overall, general or 3-betting strategy, we want to be 3-betting or folding. You see my strategy up would advocate flatting from the small blind with some hands, but overall we're going to be 3-betting from all the other positions and 3-betting mainly from the small blind with 15% of our hands, and doing some 3-betting from the big blind. And the reason why is it's going to be hard to play out of position, so you do want to flat some strong hands from the big blind. And then with that, I would touch on versus a 3-bet. We don't want to ever fold to a 3-bet. And the reason being is the equities run so close. Maybe as we get in the play and explain some examples, we'll come up with this. So we'll be like, what should we be doing when we're 3-bet here? And then if you run some equities, it'll be very apparent that we shouldn't be folding. And I think there's a really good hand that comes up where I actually do fold to a 3-bet, but it's really a tournament adjustment. This is why I'm doing it. But in a cash game, I would never fold. Not in 1 second would I have folded. And then 4-betting, we're going to basically 4-bet the 5% there. That's all worth the 4-bet. And then versus a 4-bet, we're never folding to a 4-bet. If we 3-bet, we're basically like in a capped cash game. 3-bet, 4-bet, the money's just going in. I mean, it's just the way it is, you know. So the equities run too close, and obviously some of that will come up.
And I think you make a good point too with the tournament strategy. Just like in Hold'em, that tournament strategy may dictate slightly different and possibly vastly different actions than you would do in a cash game. I can't imagine that they're going to diverge too much, versus what the strategy would be in a cash game. Maybe not as much as Hold'em, but certainly there will be some differences and some similarities there.
Yeah, for sure. So why don't we fire up some of these hands?
Yeah.
Get through a few of these. I think we've got about 10 to 15 minutes of hand review time that we can do, and in some of this, I'll probably just stick to a straightforward fundamental approach to some of these hands. Real quick, we have me here at the bottom, Jimmy the Chair to my left. Oh, and this is a $25 PLO8 tourney. I forget this guy's name. He's a relatively new player. I'm not very familiar with him. On Chair's left, new to our group. And then we have Matt Smith in the small blind here, Chu Lee in the big blind, Andre is under the gun, and as you can see, Will's the chip leader. And this is going to be, and I'm second in chips, or third, Chair's second in chips. And some of this dynamic, Will, me, and Chair dynamics are going to be a huge part, which will probably be in like a later episode. That's going to be a huge part of this final table. And then we've got Helene and 3-time circuit ring winner Johnny Masters is nimble to my right. Yeah. So, and he's and I think 2 of his rings are in PLO, so he's a very accomplished PLO player, and I think he's a very good PLO8 player, especially from what I've played with him. So this is actually kind of ideal. We've got a very tough player on our right. Chair V pips a lot, and he's on our left. And then we have Matt Smith short. Thankfully, he's the tough player, so we like to see him without a lot of chips. And then I think Will kind of still in the learning phases of PLO8, and he's got all the chips. And then we've got a lot of extremely short stacks. Andre, Helene, Chu. Just to kind of brief what I would be like kind of looking at here. And then from there on, it's just kind of play accordingly to that information. Folds to me here, just strict fundamentals. This is a fold. This is not strong enough for us to be V-pipping. So I'm gonna be using a razor fold strategy, and I think I like the min raise or the 2.5x raise. So I'm gonna primarily be folding or raising. I won't be doing any limping, and I'll be doing some potting versus limping, and I'll be doing some I'm gonna be doing 3-betting versus any raises for the most part, though I would say adjusting for tournament strategy is a consideration. Where a cash gamble would be 3-betting versus an open or folding, there's going to be some adjustments here just because stack preservation, preserve our tournament life,
Do you change your sizing in a cash game? Would you still size to that 2 or 2.5x sizing in a cash game versus a tournament, or would you size up?
So I'm using like a 2.5x in a cash game or a 3x. Yeah, so maybe sizing up more in a cash game. Now I'm going to be potting it, making big bets versus limps, and even in a tournament. This is a slam dunk open here to ace 2-4 9 double suited from the low jack, button cutoff, hijack, low jack. Oh, okay. UTG +2. So, I mean, it's just a no-brainer.
Yeah, pretty standard, I would say.
Mm-hmm. So this is actually an interesting spot, and I think I had called this hand out when I brushed up on this tournament the other day. So relatively unknown player flats and Will flats. I know Will is going to have a lot of high only hands from the big blind, so this is a dangerous flop. We want to see the turn, though. I mean, would be ideal. So I think what happens is I check, he bets half, he raises, and then there you go. He's going to have a lot of those high only hands. He's easily got a wrap or a set.
Set of queens, set of tens for sure.
Where we wanted this to check through to get to we'll look at our backdoor equities. Tons of backdoor equities. I mean, all we need is the 3 of clubs.
3 of hearts. Yeah,
we're drawing the nuts all over the place.
Preferably 3 of clubs. Right?
Yeah. So that's one thing, is that's called the pivot card. When the turn card hits to connect all your back doors like that, that's called the key pivot. And we would love to have seen that, but unfortunately, no, we didn't get to see that.
As we look at the powerhouse 10-7-5 deuce with the suited 7, obviously we are not going to be opening that hand. And I think there was actually a hand previous here, maybe a couple hands ago, that Adams skipped over queen 5-4 deuce. But a hand like that where you are in the small blind, maybe you don't have a strong low draw. I think maybe it was a suited queen. Oh, jack 5-4 deuce with the suited jack.
We'd love to see the flop. I'm sure it goes.
Matt raises.
Yeah, so Versa raise. Here we go. We got about a pot from a short stack. So here's a great example of like what our 3-betting strategy versus an EP person opening. We want to be sticking to this 5%. I want to be 3-betting or folding. I don't want him really be calling to try and see a flop. I mean, he's only got 3,000 left. I mean, what are we trying to find out by seeing a flop?
Yeah, he's going to be committed no matter what.
Yeah, so if you're going to play the hand, you want to recognize your full equity. So if we get it all in, then we get to recognize our full equity. But right here, that kind of says it all. The 5%, he's opening off a short stack EP. He's going to have a lot of strong holdings. You're pretty much straightforward. 3-betting this 5% or folding. And so that particular hand is around that 40% button open range, and that's about all I would be playing this. I do see the player pool favor this too highly. And the double suited versions from about the hijacker cutoff are reasonable to start opening. But yeah, the double suited version is definitely a better situation to be in. But I think that you got to be careful not to overplay these or think too highly of these type of hands. They're fine, but they're nowhere near premium.
Right.
So
good deal.
This is there's some action here. Tighter player, pots it pre. I mean, no brainer fold. That's total junk. Not even a thought. This isn't V-pipping anywhere. Not even calling a raise from the big blind. So here's a hand. I think this is a problem hand. I don't even think this would have gave me pause to consider playing it. But this hand with the low pair is very problematic. I think this discounts the value of the hand greatly, and I think this is trouble for the player pool in general. I see too much V-pipping with these little pairs.
For sure.
And when we have no ace deuce, we have no ace 4. I would say 3-3 ace 4 with a nut suit. That's about it. 3-3 ace 4 no suit. I'm tempted, especially against like a tighter big blind, to try and play it maybe a little wider and steal, but that's on the wide side to even play that. So this is a guaranteed fold.
I think some folks would see some of the connecting factors. They might see the suit there with the suited they might see the oops, lost your screen there. They might see the suited with the suited 6. They might see the 7-6-3 kind of working together. But yeah, that's definitely, there's not going to be enough meat on that bone to really facilitate a call. Also, something real quick from the chat that just came up, just a clarification on 10 EC stud. That player is Randy, as mentioned by Jeff Newton. So thank you, Jeff, for clarifying that for us, so we can put a name to an avatar.
I just saw a question from Andre. Why wouldn't ace 2 suited with king queen suited be the best starting hand? Low, high, flush, and straight possibilities. Yeah, that's a good question. I think sheer equity. We'll set that up and answer his question real quick.
Yeah.
Pause from the tournament. So here's the ace, deuce, king, queen, double suited. Here is the best starting hand. We'll give them different suits.
1, 1, 2, 3.
So here's the best starting hand in PLO8. Ace, ace, 2, 3, double suited. And it's kind of blocked there, but you see 65% equity versus the 35, which is kind of a favorable. Anytime we're getting 65, we love that because it's going to be hard to be better favored than that. And you can just see right there, it does not stack up nearly well enough against ace, ace, deuce, 3. So sheer suits, or sheer equities would be why that is not the best hand. Though it's a very good hand, a very, very playable hand.
Yeah, we're certainly not shying away from the ace, deuce, king, queen whatsoever.
So I think we'll look at this last hand here, and it's not a hand that I play, and then we can end the hand review. We're running out of time. Here comes Mike.
Yeah, I was just about to mention that. He's knocking on the virtual door.
I noticed him up there. Hey, Mike.
Hey.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I was so rudely interrupted by Mother Nature.
Sorry about that.
Shame.
Anyway, where were we?
I think
we were going over one more hand. I think we had talked about in the hand review.
I think we're on our final hand, and then we were going to save the rest for later, but we'll still award the giveaway. I think I know who the winner is, but let's do this last hand. So you've got a limp from Nimble off of 10 bigs, 11 big, well, I guess 12 to start. I'm not a fan. I like to see so when you get shorter here, it's almost like potting. It's like shoving, the equivalent of shoving and hold'em. I like to see the pot or fold strategy, especially when you limp here. You're generally inviting more people into the pot, and then we're kind of splitting our equity up with a lot of different opponents. You could win a big one, but you're also going to lose a blind or two and be even shorter, and a big blind's about to hit you. But
and with Johnny Master stack there, he's not going to be potting and folding with really any hand he has, right? Okay.
So you deny a lot of equity, especially people are perceptive to this. If he pots it, he's basically like, hey, I've got a hand I'm going with. So you get a lot of folds. Basically, people have to have something to play back at you, and especially if you're doing this with like about 5 to 10% of hands, then you're totally fine getting the money in. So there's not really, there's a lot of incentive to pot it. I wouldn't say it's a lot, but there's more incentive to pot it, less incentive to be limping and inviting this multi-way pot to ensue. But really kind of neither here nor there the way this hand plays out. So Chair goes with the mini, and then on the short stack, Chewed jams for what looks like 5 bigs. I'm sure it folds back to Chair, who calls. He should never be folding. Their hands are tabled. Oddly enough, PokerStars is saying that Chair has 59% equity versus the 41% equity, though.
Is it just looking at the high hand possibility?
I don't think so. We could verify it, but just because, here's the key. They're sharing these 3 cards. So that's just
a mirror.
Yeah, it's just a wash.
Huh.
And then so we're down to 1 side card. They both have 1 suit. It doesn't nut suit versus non-nut suit doesn't matter.
True.
In this heads up situation. They both just have 3 of a suit. They don't really care if they make the nut because they're the only ones with the flush draw to the diamonds or the spades. So this side
neither
card,
one of them has a blocker either.
Yeah, This is an annoying PLO8 situation, though, and it does come up. I mean, you'll probably see it again before this tournament even ends, but where you kind of have a very similar hand, and then this one side card here is actually giving you a lot more equity because it's really just coming down. They're gonna chop. They're gonna chop the low a lot, and then this kicker here is helping him pull the high side of the pot. So I think that actually is accurate.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think when we see the flop, there's no low, which is actually, well, he flops an open-ended. He doesn't flop anything, but I think he holds with his like 9 high or something.
Like a boss.
Yeah, 9 high like a boss.
Yeah.
So this was all fine. Choose play, totally fine. I think the mini against the limp, I'd like to see a maybe bigger sizing from chair, but I'm definitely wanting to VPIP this ace deuce with a suit and a side card from the low jack. I can understand being careful because if he's limping on a short stack, being careful, but even some there's just a lot of different speculative hands that might want to limp here that this is going to do totally fine against. So I think even going bigger sizing I like, but other than that, this is all pretty much standard. Totally correct for Chew to shove. Go with that hand. You'd like to have the Broadway card, but it's about just outside the 10%. Replacing that 6 with a Broadway is ideal.
Yeah.
And now you're seeing why. Now you're seeing why this isn't in the 10% range. Just this kicker was why chair won the pot. But that's why you see at the bottom of the range, the ace 3 5 10 being the key here, and having that Broadway side card just is helping your hand a little bit. But yeah, you're still going to be shoving.
And just one point of clarification on the range spreadsheet that you had up just there. When you say single suited or double suited there, you're assuming that one of those suits is the ace, no matter what. Is that a fair statement?
One of those suits is the ace. No, it doesn't have to be.
Okay.
Double suited is just very strong. So if it's I'm trying to think of a scenario where, are you saying the double suited? I don't know how it could not be.
Either.
Well, for the double suited, it has to be, but for the
Yeah.
single
Yeah.
suited, like if you're single suited, ace deuce 10-10, but your suit is the
10,
deuce 10.
Deuce, yeah.
Yeah, it's still V-pipping. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, still the
All right.
same. Ideally, the suited ace is better.
Of course.
But we're also not that concerned with suit over suit when there's a lot of raising and 3-betting. I have another visitor.
That is way.
Come here.
Welcome to the podcast.
Okay, we're gonna go
junior commentator in training.
Well, that's it. That's all I got.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Thanks for all the questions and for listening to us ramble about poker. It's been fun.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah.
Have a
Thank
good
you,
one.
guys.
Peace out.
Hey, guys.